I really want to try to do better.
Matt, we at the Bill Simmons podcast also want to try to do better. Starting now.
All right, let's do it.
It's the Bill Simmons podcast. I'm Chris.
And I'm Matt. I felt like that was better.
There were 3 podcasts last week, Matt. First episode, that was the Sunday night disaster with Russillo plus redraftables. 2 hours, 25 minutes, and 15 seconds. The second was with DeRay McKesson. Not bad. The second half of that was Steve Kerr, Pete Carroll, Greg Popovich. No Bill Simmons. We will not discuss that. In total, it was 151-43, but the amount that we actually are going to talk about was like 46 minutes. The third one was with Cece Sabathia. I've been criticized for my pronunciation of Cece's last name. 115-26. Very reasonable. It's the Bill Simmons podcast.
Here we go.
This feels different.
Matt, on the first podcast of last week, this is hugely problematic, and I think even Bill has recognized this.
Well, he at least recognizes that he's been told.
See, that's really part of the problem. Bill does not have a good sense of self-awareness.
Right.
Once people tell him he f***ed up, I think he kind of understood it. We're at a f***ed up time in American society where it is slowly dawning on the people like us who have enjoyed an enormous amount of privilege, while a lot of other people from different backgrounds have been sort of unnecessarily and violently burdened as a result of the status of their birth. When I approach a podcast like this one, the first thing I think is, well, it sure would be nice if we were just talking about sports. And I think the response nowadays has to be, well, it sure would be nice if people weren't being killed. And then we can get back to sports.
Yes.
But there's a little bit of an injustice problem we have to get through first. Credit to Bill for recognizing that. No credit, however, for his execution, which is something like an hour of let's talk about everything that's f***ed up in society. Even though he doesn't necessarily do a great job of talking about it, he's having the conversation. And then horribly ugly pivot to the 2005 NBA draft and what could have gone better.
Yes.
It just was so tone deaf, and it was a step in the right direction, but the execution was just so ghastly that he deserved to get jumped on.
And the funny thing was, Chris, I think you and I, before we even listened to the podcast, commented on the title. You just read it and said, oof, this is not good. I think it was something like America's Bad Weekend.
A truly sad week in America, plus the 2005 NBA redraftables with Ryan Russillo. All right, so here's what you came for, listener. 20 seconds into the Russillo podcast, this swallow in an ad.
Critter's mission. Throughout everything happening this year, there's
6 seconds later, this swallow in an ad.
their teams. If you're looking for a job.
At 1:43, this concerning omission.
All right, here we go. All right.
No Pearl Jam.
They came right back.
At 1:48, my notes say P capital T.
7 o'clock, PT.
Yeah.
I should have known. It's time zones.
I knew it as soon as you said it.
Matt's over here nodding or shaking his head at me. At 3:01, unnecessary article.
The OJ, that whole.
If he had just said the OJ thing, we still would have killed him for it, but it would have been right. Instead, maybe he's talking about, and the joke here is pretty obvious, the orange juice. Maybe he means the riots, in this case, brushing your teeth, because having orange juice after you brush your teeth, terrible idea.
Yeah, it is.
Matt, do you know what the Grove is?
It's in California, right?
Yeah, I think it's a mall.
Like
I have never been there. At 4:08, listen to the concern in Bill's voice about the Grove.
And to see the Grove in peril, it seemed like they kind of fended it off a little bit.
Doesn't a little bit of this reek like Bill saying, and I mean, even all the rich places were getting fucked up. You
Privilege,
know I paid
Bill. It's privilege.
$15 million for this house, and I have 7 of them.
Yes. Matt just banging shit around. At 10:15, listen to the apparent distinction between these two things.
Either thrived or were pretty good for America.
It's a weird parallel, Matt. Something can thrive, or it sounds like also be pretty good. Like when I think about thrive, I think of plants.
Yeah.
How are the tomato plants doing? They're thriving. What about the cucumbers? Sorry, only pretty good. At 18:09, this.
Expressing.
At 18:29, this Joe Bluth nominee.
They're just whether we care about sports.
At 1950, if you use either ... or, it makes it sound like you're talking about two different things, but not here.
He has thought constantly about how will this help me get either reelected or stay in this for 4 more years.
If someone is not reelected, is the thought that he's going to stay in it for 4 more years voluntarily? At 1952.
And you look at the way he did with the pandemic. It was the same thing.
I do look at the way he
that
did.
That thing you do.
I think at 2632, Bill is talking about the news cycle.
They don't want this to go into the cycle of it because...
Here's the context, Matt.
I'm talking about the people that were out there. They don't want this to go away. They don't want this to be like 3 days later, we're going to be talking about, I don't know, the new Avengers movie or whatever. Like,
they don't want this to go into the cycle of it because...
When he says go into the cycle of it, I just don't understand. At 2847, unnecessary article or Chris and Matt don't understand this neighborhood reference.
You know, they went there. They went to Beverly Hills.
And the Melrose Fairfax, which again is not like...
just out of the blue.
It's just unbelievable. How does he do this so often?
Clearly, Matt, he is not listening to the Bill Simmons podcast, as we have many suggestions every week on how he can improve.
He's got to know about us.
I
know, but
give yourself too much credit.
We basically use his trademark in our logo, Chris.
No, this is all satire. It's legally protected content. At 2931, this Joe Bluth nominee.
All the people that were peacefully protesting. So
Pearl testing. Hey, how much stress can that oyster-generated gem take? I guess we'll have to get the Pearl tester out here. Speaking of trademarks, sort of, and the need to prosecute them. At 3443.
They're out of ways to litigate this.
I don't like it. And I looked up litigate just to be sure. Merriam-Webster, to carry on a legal contest by judicial process or to decide and settle in a court of law. He uses litigate too freely.
Yes.
He just means to discuss or talk about. And that's not even how you use litigate in a non-legal sense.
If you were here, listeners, you'd see our scoreboard.
Matt is the scorekeeper. At 3459. We disagree. And
I get it. I do.
No, you don't. You are rich. You are an only child. You are white. You are from the Northeast. You went to a fucking prep school.
Yep.
Then you went to Holy Cross. You have never feared for your life because you're getting pulled over for speeding.
Yes. Holy Cross is such a upper middle class white university that Clarence Thomas devotes like a whole section of his memoir where he's like, yeah, I went to like the whitest university there was.
At 3744, Matt, it sounds like what you're trying to do is in some way turn on a robot. That is, sexually turn on a robot.
If this doesn't push people to activate in all the right ways.
I like that one.
Please, Bill, activate me in all the right ways.
Not tonight, robot. Now we're down.
Yes. At 3756, Matt, you know who he sounds like, of course.
Social stuff that happened.
He sounds like Zachary Roloff from Little People, Big World.
Of course.
Matt, you're a big fan of sample sizes.
Of course. Do you mean like for data or?
Like if you go to Costco on a Sunday?
Yeah, that's what I was getting at.
Can I take all these without paying, or would that be considered theft? No, Matt, I'm talking about the way you measure a sample size, which Bill thinks at 4506 is probably done with a ruler.
Do you have a longer sample size for each series?
Sample sizes are not measured in time
well, maybe,
or in length.
Maybe the thing that the samples are just lined up. The things.
The way they test it is by having someone on a motorcycle try to jump it.
Got
it is. Ramp it, perhaps. At 4520, he means asterisk.
The Spurs title is always the asterisk from 99.
You know how I know, Matt? Because at 4529, he says asterisk.
Why was that an asterisk?
I don't know how you get the two mixed up. If you know how to say it, just say it right. It's okay if you correct yourself. It really is. Yeah, it's lazy. At 4617, this Joe Bluth nominee.
A diminish is the wrong word.
Actually, Matt, you know what that is? It's more of a foghorn leghorn.
Oh, yes. I said demin.
At 4648, he means asterisk with a K. We know he does.
There's more asterisk-style excuses.
Matt, at 50 minutes and 14 seconds, there's a conversation about allowing higher seeds to pick who they play in this NBA tournament. Bill then says this list of things.
That would be really fun to monitor.
Would be fun to monitor. Okay.
Watch.
Okay.
Right. And guess who they're due.
Guess who they would do. So this is how the game is played.
It might actually be, but before you tell us how the game is played, Matt, it might be guess how they're due. But let's pretend he would say
who they're due.
Guess who they're due.
I think it's who. So the game is you monitor them.
Mm-hmm.
You watch them.
Yes.
You decide who would they have intercourse with.
Yes. Matt, at 5133, Bill is not paying attention and then tries to get his short-term memory to catch him back up to speed, and this goofiness ensues.
You have 30 wins. Right.
Milwaukee's like, lose.
This is great because Ryan is like, this joke was good. Affirm me. Right.
Right.
Activate laughter robot. Speaking of laughter, at 5150.
We're happy to battle them.
Yeah, just battle them. That's going to sound great in slow-mo.
We're happy to battle them.
At 5208.
Finish him.
I've been really impressed by every piece of how they've handled it. And how the owners are just really believe in him.
It just doesn't make any sense.
At 5453, listen to what's going on in the background.
A little bit more.
Bill is breathing into the mic.
It was like the mic was his glasses, and he had to clean them.
Smudged up. At 5605, one of our favorite things, Bill making noises.
The whole, we lost $1 million last year.
It's just the laziest possible thing. Let me get across just totally tonally how this is an irritation. At 5616, I take issue with the argument here about the financial construction of the league owners.
There's no rule that you have to make money every year. Just sell the franchise if you don't like your profit this year.
It's such a stupid argument, Matt. If you are the owner of a business and you don't like how the business is running, you don't just divest yourself. You try to figure out a way to make the business more profitable.
Right.
Now, that may come at some cost. And in Bill's argument, the cost is something to do with the players or the player safety, which is okay, fine. And when I say okay, fine, I mean you should consider that, of course. But you aren't required to. And so if you want to be somebody like Donald Sterling, you could just, coast along and maybe make the playoffs by happenstance every 7 or 8 years and participate in profit sharing and make a great deal of money.
Yeah.
You're allowed to do that. And if you own the franchise, you can do whatever the you want.
Yep.
At 5936, this is the pause that refreshes.
Coronavirus.
But when you talk about the opposite direction.
Maybe just edit that out, Cousin Kyle.
Coronavirus.
But when you talk about the opposite direction, you're
at 10110. I'm concerned about the implication of this turn of phrase.
You might not do that right either.
Did you screw that as well?
I think he means screw that up.
Yeah. No.
But he says screw that as well.
Screw that as well.
Maybe he was talking about the robots.
I'm worried that the robots are not rust-proofed enough.
Well, you have to activate them in all the right ways first.
Oh, right. Touch my robot nipples. 10141. Here are all the places we Americans like for drinking.
Miller Lite can still be enjoyed with your people. Maybe not always in bars or gatherings.
Bars and also gatherings. Hey, what are you going to do later on, Matt? I'm going to head down to the gathering, have a few Miller Lights, enjoy myself.
Like Magic the Game, right?
Yes.
Nerds.
At 102.25, he means exactly.
It's exactly.
Exactly. It's like he went British for a second.
Oh, I thought maybe he was like Nandor.
Oh.
At 102.45, this botch.
Pay any outrageous monthly fee.
At 102.55, this botch.
Best overall home security by 2020 by U.S. News and World Report.
At 103.20, this botch.
/BS to make sure that they know our show.
Listen to all the things that make the 2005 draft fun. At 103.37.
It's a really fun draft to dissect.
So there's one.
Make fun of.
That's two. And then?
All those things.
Those things.
Also, all those things implies like all those things I have previously said.
Or
so it's
all
not
those
even
things
like
that are
an extender.
the logical extensions of dissection and making fun of. At 104.40, I nominate this as a missing article.
Dumb era for NBA.
Isn't it the NBA?
Yes. He burned all his articles. He has an article quota.
At 106.44, Joe Bluth nominee.
Because even if you just look at college stats is
Look.
At 107.34, Bill botches this cliche.
they certainly don't have a point guard you would want to write home about.
How's your point guard? Well, I wouldn't want to write home about him. What he means
Dear
is
Mom.
It's nothing to write home about. But that's not how it works.
Dear Mom, Chris Paul seems nice. He's good at basketball.
At 109.57, Buffalo Bill.
Do you remember the trade?
Oh, wow. Do you remember the trade to the big fat girls?
Yes. At 119.03, when you're thinking about saying the word league and you get confused about your words.
Think how weak the league was.
He got cocky. He got it right. Said weak. Second time around, leak. At 119.42, not pish.
Or was that Pistons team?
You remember Samuel Pepys, the famous 1600s London diarist? When his response to the Great London Fire was pish, a woman might piss it out. When I was in high school, Matt, I did a presentation in English class. It was an oral presentation. I started by saying, pish, a woman might piss it out, that quote. And then afterwards, the teacher who rode a motorized scooter told me that it was inappropriate. And I was like, it's a f***ing quote from the guy you made us read. At 123.46, I agree with everything you say, but I also think we can argue.
You really think so?
I'm saying there's legitimacy to having the argument. I just thought it was absurd.
You can have the argument, sure. There's no problem with having the argument. But otherwise, I totally jump ship to your point, Ryan. At 127.17.
Is there a dumber argument in sports than Chris Paul or Darren Williams, which is a theme I'd said.
It was a theme I said. Probably wasn't a theme he said. Probably was something he wrote about. At 127.39, it made me recall Bill's Texan impersonation.
It was like, go fuck yourself.
Fuck you.
Yes. What did he think he was expecting at 131.40?
And that was way more than I thought was expecting in 05.
Who was expecting? What was expecting?
We have a pregnant woman, and that person was expecting. But what if it turns out you have 7 pregnant women? That's way more than you thought was expecting in 05. At 133.56, thing.
They had just missed the playoffs, and Kobe's just pissed that his teammates aren't good enough, the whole thing.
Not even an adjective.
At 139.24, some unnecessary insight into Cousin Kyle.
They're just like, grab trays, load it up with food, and let's go in the back and get out of here. Like, we're not here to do the meet and greet and take pictures.
By the way, that's what Nephew Kyle does at ringer parties. Same fucking move. Same move.
Cousin Kyle continuing to endear himself to his coworkers. You're here totally because of nepotism. It is clear you are inept at your job. You don't seem to give a shit. And then you just show up at parties and take all the fucking food and then don't even kick it. You just leave, you fucking bum. At 139.46, this laughter.
Wow.
Sounded forced. At 141.17, Joe Bluth nominee.
Otis gave for, what did he get? He gave Lewis.
Don't understand. At 147.33, I do not agree with this affirmation.
I still say Duran is a joke.
Right.
Right. You do sometimes make that joke.
Yes. I think there's a difference here between most improved and someone who must improve, but Bill does not. At 148.04.
And his most improved was must improve.
At 149.44, this swallow.
Thing at Granger falling. I'll give you the first pick.
At 151.27, unnecessary article.
And then the 2015 against the Rockets.
At 151.46, unnecessary article.
Then the 2018, he gets hurt.
It did twice in the same years. This is like the unnecessary article all-star game.
Yeah. At 157, just certain ones.
Verjao was another one. There's just certain ones.
He just does not know when to use the right words. At 203.53, this swallow.
Danny Granger, who ends up going 17th.
At 207.31, this swallow.
It's
at 213.45. What word do you think Bill is leaving out when he describes what his dad loves?
I think a lot of us like David Lee. We liked his game. We'd always kind of wanted to see him on a good team. My dad always loved him. My dad loves like lefty rebounders.
White. That's the word he's leaving out. His dad loves white lefty rebounders.
Bill, like, what can I say that my dad likes other than white basketball players?
Right.
Who's that new guy playing for the Celtics? Oh, he's left-handed. That's great. How many rebounds does he have?
Yes.
Oh, man.
Wow. At 217.35.
Probably a nightmare in the locker room and all those things.
Which things?
I'm probably a nightmare in the locker room and also all the things.
My favorite turn of phrase from the entire week, man, at 218.05.
Him and Reddick were basically like these appendages for them. It was weird.
Appendage, an adjunct to something larger or more important. A usually projecting part of an animal or plant body, which is typically smaller and of less functional importance than the main part to which it is attached, especially a limb or analogous part.
Not an appendage.
No, he got it wrong. I don't even know what he means. At 221.11, laughter.
Raymond Felton. Okay.
At 224.37, bad branding.
One more BS podcast this week.
We'll be back after this on the Bill Simmons podcast.
the tray. Finish him.
Matt, we use Anchor.fm for the Bill Simmons podcast. Anchor.fm allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer, and it's free. Anchor will not only let you record and edit, you can also distribute your podcast to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more through Anchor. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership, which is handy for the Bill Simmons podcast. Anchor.fm has everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started.
It's the Bill Simmons podcast. I'm Chris.
And I'm Matt. Can we do that again?
No.
Let's do that again.
No, Matt, you sound like you're a very enthusiastic Sunday morning NPR host.
And now we're going to talk about the Bill Simmons podcast.
Sorry, swallowed, choking on some spit.
Matt, on second podcast of last week, it began with DeRay McKesson with some pretty thoughtful conversations about race and culture. And then Bill abdicated his podcast completely to another episode from another podcast and let Pete Carroll, Steve Kerr, and Greg Popovich talk with no Bill Simmons at all on the Bill Simmons podcast.
Did you say advocated?
Abdicated.
That's what okay.
That's good, right?
No, abdicated is correct. I just thought you said advocated.
Well, we'll just loop this in. Abdicated, just in case. 0 seconds in. Bad branding.
Today's episode of the BS Podcast.
At 1:56, Bill begins to reckon with what he has done.
Wanted to quickly mention, on Sunday night, Rusilla and I did a Shoot the Shit podcast coming off of everything that happened on Friday and Saturday night.
See, the problem is this, Matt. If you're going to just shoot the shit, just shoot the shit. But if you're going to shoot the shit and talk about race riots, it is no longer shooting the shit.
Yes.
You have to treat the subject with the dignity and the respect it deserves.
Right.
So if you're talking about having a whole cake, you can shoot the shit about it. If you're talking about people being killed while protesting police brutality, don't just shoot the shit.
Yes.
That's a bad look. What does Bill think about that? Here's what he says at 2:18.
I think I just misread the moment on Sunday night.
He did.
Yeah, it seems like you did, Bill.
But that's the right thing to say. At least he's being somewhat transparent in his response to the response to him. Now, it would have been better if he got it right the first time. It would have been better if he got it right without the need for people to tell him he got it wrong. But you know what? It's better to get it wrong and then get it right than to just get it wrong. At 2:21, he continues to use this excuse.
I was trying to do a shoot the shit, take your mind off things kind of podcast like we would always do on Sunday. And the moment was bigger than that. And I wish I had an expert with us that we could have bounced some questions off of and tried to learn from.
Yeah.
That's what he should have done.
Yep.
At 2:43, excuses.
Look, I'm 50 years old. I still barely know what I'm doing, and I'm still going to make mistakes, and I'm still not going to throw a no-hitter every step of the way.
The biggest problem is this, and it's something that, as far as I can tell, he has not reckoned with. It is his privilege. And I hate the term privilege because it sounds like I am co-opting or appropriating terminology of a protest that I am not really a part of. I recognize the victimization. I recognize centuries of oppression.
Yeah.
But, I'm not the person who comes from a culture that has received it, and I don't have to live under the fear of that oppression. Bill doesn't even seem to recognize where he's coming from, recognizing the gifts that are simply born to him. At 3:11, turns out this is no longer just a podcast, Matt.
I want to use this platform to educate people.
This is a sports and pop culture website, and Bill is making the transparently pandering pivot from sports and pop culture to
educating and shining a light
on his platform.
Yes.
At 3:27, Pearl Jam. At 12:43, poetry.
Hey, what a coincidence. They're having less incidents.
That goes in the beat.
Now, Matt, I will point out, we're not going to take a lot of issue with what Bill and DeRay McKesson talk about. We're not going to really take shots at the subject of the conversation.
Good idea.
We will, however, take shots at Bill when he says something stupid. Like when he tries to make the switch at 12:53 from police brutality and racial murder to sports.
And at some point, it almost becomes like sports where, like in the NBA.
He does this all the time.
This is bad. This is a tough choice to defend, so we won't do that. At 34:16, listen to what Bill says and then think about how much he is worth.
Yeah, I was going to say, what would you do with more resources? Because, I think if there was ever a time to raise more resources, it's right now. So what would you do? Like what would be, let's say you were able to pull in an extra 250,000 or whatever. Like, where would you spend that money?
Now, first of all, when he's talking about resources, Matt, he's talking about money.
Yes.
Forbes reported that Bill made $82 million last year. What percent is 250,000 of 82 million? Do you know?
0.3%. What
do you think the average wage is?
Probably something like $55,000 or something like that.
If we consider the annual salary of $55,000 to be pretty reflective, it might not be. I'm guessing it's too high. But let's say it's $55,000. You know what 0.003 of that is?
Like $150.
Yeah, you're really pretty close. 165.
Yeah, that would be like over a year.
Right. So what we're hearing is Bill talk about the resources, and for example, his example, $250,000, which is the equivalent to $165. At no time does Bill say, I'm going to give you $250,000.
When he said that, I interpret it as like, I'm about to give you $250,000. Now, maybe I'm not saying he would have published it. Maybe Bill's a nice guy and was just like, I don't need to tell people I did this. I'm just going to do it.
It is possible that Bill is saying or said, and just didn't publicize it, that he is going to give $250,000 to He Can't Wait. But why have this conversation if you're not going to talk about it? At 3709, it sounds like Bill's taking a stand here.
The George Floyd murder. I know we're supposed to call it death, but I'm going to call it murder.
Who says you're supposed to call it death?
Yeah, I was thinking that when he said it. I mean, even like police unions were saying this was a murder.
At 4123, I don't think this was okay even then.
When people just got in the car and they drove. I know I did it in college, because nobody was telling me it was a bad thing to do.
Bill drove drunk in college. He has admitted to this on the podcast. Statute of limitations, I'm sure, in Massachusetts has long expired, but he did it. The reason he did it, and the reason it's justified, no one told him it was a bad thing to do. And this is like George Costanza having sex with the cleaning woman on the desk, right? What? Well, if somebody had told me that we weren't supposed to do that sort of thing. And he has said this on multiple occasions now. And then I think Greg Popovich makes this same analogy, but he credits an unknown person. He says like he heard it on something or saw it on something. Is it coincidence, or do we think that Bill also heard it somewhere else but just didn't credit it?
No, I think Bill probably heard Popovich talking about it.
Maybe that was it, yeah. But I just don't. I mean, I get the general point that it's like, hey, look, this is a thing that wasn't in the cultural awareness.
Although I will point out, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, founded in 1980. Bill went to college, we think in like 88, 89.
Yeah.
It was there.
Yeah, and even if his point is there wasn't the awareness about it now, like it was illegal, but people didn't frown upon it the same way they do now. But that's not the same as, well, but nobody told me not to do it, therefore I was okay with it. It's not a good week for Bill.
No. Bill goes on then to say this at 4135.
And it changed in all of these ways where now it's not a good thing to do. People know that.
The problem is that it's not now a bad thing to do. It has always been a bad and dangerous thing to do.
And also, people always knew that.
Yeah, but people recognize it. I'm 5 years younger than Bill is, so I went to college about 5 years after he did, maybe 4. I think he took the prep school year. I knew when I was in college it was bad because I knew you could get arrested.
Yeah.
To suggest that 4 or 5 years before that was not part of the cultural consciousness is fucking absurd.
It's just like, it's not like there's a secret DUI arrest that we don't know about. Like, Bill didn't have to come out and say this.
Right. At 4140, here's why, in order, DUIs are bad.
You get a DUI, it could be something that hangs on you, or you could kill somebody. There's all these terrible things.
Number 1, you can have a record. Number 2, someone dies. At 4445, this botch.
Penn producer, multi-Emmy winner.
At 4518, this botch.
About Full Sail University's Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting.
And Matt, this is where the Bill Simmons podcast stops, because this is where the Bill Simmons podcast stops, and he turns it over to Flying Coach.
We'll be back after this.
Raymond Felton. Okay.
Matt, as always, we want to thank the people that support us monetarily, not the people that support us emotionally, because honestly, emotional support doesn't pay the bills the way Josh N., Jeff G., Scott B., Sean, and our friends at College Football Brothers Podcast support us with money. They do it through Patreon, patreon.com/bspodpod. You can also support us as David P. and Scott B. do through Anchor. That's anchor.fm/bspodpod. David, as we always say, you're giving us too much money. Also, I think Scott B. is possibly giving us money through Anchor and Patreon. Scott, it's not worth it. Thank you very much to our producers. Here are all the things Bill and his guests found delicious in the last week. Or just funny sounds.
At his expense.
Today, my wife took our kids to the neighbor's pool, and I didn't do anything except for up this bookcase. And it was one of those things where the bookcase has like wood paneling on the back, and in order for the wood paneling, which you have to screw in, and each panel has 18 individual fucking screws, little tiny screws. In order to do it, you have to make sure like these grooves line up. When I first put it together, the fucking grooves were on the front and on the back. It's just so goddamn irritating. And all you can do is go, well, I fucked this up, and now I have to unfuck it and then redo it all.
You have to take the whole thing apart and put it back together?
Everything I did, I had to undo.
Ugh.
And it's just this so like insane, helpless fury where you're like, I did this. I mean, you know, what am I supposed to say? I did it. Now I have to undo it. I'm a man who could do with a little bit more exercise in my life. The first time around, when I'm just screwing in the sides or whatever it is on this bookcase, I'm literally dripping with sweat. And then I'm like, now I got to go do this again, backwards and then forwards. Oh, God. I am sore from screwing. And it involves way more metal than that statement would typically contain. Yeah. Jesus Christ. Matt, we should point out that for the commentary on the third podcast of last week, we got cut off, so we're doing this on different equipment. I'm sure the people out there who rely on us for pristine audio quality are going to be disappointed. The third podcast of last week, 1 hour, 15 minutes, and 26 seconds, very brief.
Yeah.
Featuring CC Sabathia. Did I say it right?
You got it. Possibly soon to be employee of the Ringer.
0 seconds in, bad branding.
Tonight's episode of the BS podcast.
Subdued bad branding.
Yeah.
At 18 seconds in, this botch.
Well, I think a lot of things may change as our world opens up again.
At 2 minutes and 13 seconds, Bill continues to consider his sports and pop culture podcast a platform.
Try to use your platform to educate people.
Hitherto, Matt, he had been trying to educate people on his platform about who should have gone 7th in the 1998 NBA draft, but now breaking down centuries of cultural built-in racism.
Or at least until he feels like he can get away with not doing it anymore.
At 3:24, Bill has been considering everything he's heard for the last 20 years, but especially this segment of time.
Have definitely listened to a lot of feedback, especially, going back 20 years, but especially the last week or so.
Wow. 0.01%. Yeah, that seems like the way you want to make a pivot for your entire business. Makes sense. 5:28, affecting change.
I know my position as somebody who runs a company and has the ability to affect change in a couple different ways.
So there are 2 ways.
2 different ways. One of them probably has something to do with T-shirts.
Right.
And then the other one probably educating on his platform.
Right.
Also, this is the guy who is excoriated by his business's union for having something like 86% of his guests on the podcast white males. Maybe that's the position he's going to change.
The union has become exceptionally hostile.
Pearl Jam, Matt, 6 minutes in. Holy cow. For all of you who wait to listen to the Bill Simmons podcast, just so you know how far you can skip or fast forward, or if you're going to use the special Spotify app, play at a slightly faster pace, this is the longest I can remember. 6 full minutes.
Do you think there are people who listen to us before they listen to Bill?
Mm-hmm. Just so they know how long to skip till we get to Pearl Jam.
Okay.
Where it's a public service. At 10:54. Speech impediment.
I mean, you got to be getting recognized, right?
Weird thing to say, perhaps from a Freudian analysis perspective, when you're making a huge point to be culturally inclusive and talking to an African-American professional about a lot of race and culture things, to say white.
Yes, seems like a problem.
At 25:35, this botch and swallow.
First on-lane wager only, except in Colorado. Must wager in designated offer market.
That's exactly the way he sounded when he tried to ask a girl to couple skate when he was in 8th grade and then got shot down. 31:44 thing.
The Indians thing falls apart.
Do you remember what thing the Indians had that fell apart, Matt? Was it
their
the team?
Season?
At 35:09, old man makes noise.
He doesn't want to get hurt. The blah, blah, blah. And it's like, all right.
With the blah, blah, blah.
Always an effective rhetorical technique.
Yes.
You learn so much about Bill and where he learned things from these podcasts, such as these pieces from Unknown at 36:45.
I'm sure you're learning, different pieces from whoever.
Yeah, CC, is that true? That when you joined the Yankees, you began to learn different pieces?
Plural.
And then CC's like, Well, I don't think I learned pieces. Well, from whoever. Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
well, I mean,
I did that.
I guess that's true. It seems like you're saying a thing that almost can't possibly not be true.
No, I never learned anything, and if I did, it was not from anyone. This is some weird qualification here at 3819.
Title, you want to live in a big city or adjacent to a big city, things like that.
Why would it matter if it was adjacent to a big city? At 3834, more vagaries. Try to parse this out, Matt.
Somebody was lurking in the ninth inning that was just going to shut down whatever you had just done in the best way.
If you had done something...
it's the end that really gets you.
He was like, man, I forgot what I was talking about. This is about Mariano Rivera.
Rivera, yeah.
You always had sort of like somebody to rely on if things were getting screwy.
Right.
Somebody was going to shut down whatever you had just done. So if you had been playing effectively, he would shut that down. If you had been playing poorly, he was also going to shut that down. And the way he would shut it down was the best.
The best.
When I was thinking best way or what best way meant, what I assumed was there was a marching band involved. There was gold epaulets. There was some kind of a hat with a feather. Like, it was going to be a very classy shutting down.
Yankee Doodle?
It was a Music Man. At 3927, listen to what Bill's sports fan son is into.
He's a 12-and-a-half-year-old kid, and he loves lists.
Shock. I wonder if any of those lists involve decades.
All right, Matt, time for some judgment by you at 3948.
Right. Who I would start with.
Oh, that's tough. I think it's H's.
I was expecting you to go, but you're the judge. So if you say H's, it's H's. At 4010, Bill, we cannot see you.
He just he's like kind of over here.
Apparently, Mariano Rivera is in a class by himself.
Right.
But he's communicating that via gesture on an audio podcast. 4019, more judgment, please.
But he's like kind of over here on the side.
That's like a hybrid. There's not as much phlegm in it. It's still a CH.
Matt, do you know what the past tense of the word raise is?
I think you just put an ED on the end.
Raised, right?
Right.
All right, listen to this at 4213.
They were the first game when we rose the banner in 05.
No, you didn't rose it. More bad English here. 4 seconds later.
Rivera gets introduced.
Either he got introduced or he gets introduced. He never got introduced.
He got it.
At 4316, this Joe Bluth nominee.
I don't know. It's listen, I've managed to.
The best part.
Also, we never find out what it feels. It's like, listen, we are.
Yes. He stutters, then tells us to listen. We gave Bill so much credit when he was able to correctly say the name of his company's podcast last week. And then he goes around and does this at 4919.
If you haven't listened to Boom Bust, The Rise and Fall of HQ, hosted by Alyssa Beresnack.
It's the Rise and Fall of HQ trivia. That same word always trips him up. At 4928, he means podcasts.
And if you like narrative podcasts, I highly recommend that one.
If you like narrative podcast, the one. Matt at 5155, listen to something Mookie Betts could have been and also was.
But you're also losing somebody that I felt like could have been important in the city and was.
What the fuck?
Well, it's almost like he said it, and as he was saying it, was like, shit, it sounds like I'm saying Mookie didn't do any good things for the city. So he's like, oh, he did do those things. Why don't he just re-say it?
Yeah, no, he wouldn't do that. At 5429, see if you can predict what they're about to say. They don't say it, but you can feel it in the air.
Maybe we just use cheap beer. We use
Doesn't it sound like CC is about to say a beer that starts with MI before he's cut off?
It does.
Can you think of a cheap beer, Matt, that starts with MI?
Yeah, I think I can. I think it's the same one that was Bill's favorite when he was a kid.
Yes.
Maybe we just use cheap beer. We use Miller Lite.
At 5756.
But that guy works as hard on his game as anybody.
You think what he meant to do was have Cousin Kyle take out the fact that he said, that guy worked. And then Cousin Kyle was like, say what now? At 5830, bail.
It's danger. Plus you're compacting the games.
It's danger. Danger, Will Robinson.
Then he goes on 4 seconds later to explain what the problems are.
Plus you're compacting the games. You're playing more games in a condensed rate.
What he means is you're playing more games in a shorter amount of time. The games are not being compacted. Then the second thing he says, More games at a condensed rate. The rate of games is being condensed. 59-34. The funny thing is, I know what he means. It's just the way he chooses to say it.
It seems it's a little floating because if series end early, they might be able to speed up the next series.
It's a
calendar
little floating.
is a little floating. You wonder if Cece is sitting there across from him thinking to himself, am I going to be working for this idiot? A little floating. Sure. These checks are going to clear, right? At 1 hour, 7 minutes, and 35 seconds. Extra C's.
Was one of the great bench clearing brawl.
Just in case you thought it was an anomaly, as Matt says, at 108.09, this.
For the bench clearing brawl.
Ooh, that was not multiple C's, Matt. That was just like...
queering.
At 109.12. I think he just decided, I need some sort of modifying clause in here. And this is what he went with.
It was just an old school kind of disaster for a sports team.
He's talking about Drew Brees saying people should never protest during the national anthem or with the flag.
Yeah.
This is an old school kind of disaster for a sports team. No, it's not. At 113.22, Bill, again, overestimating himself.
What do you think I should do with my platform over the next few weeks and months?
Come on, dude.
Oh, yeah, this was my favorite. The token. By the way, he's never done this again.
Asking people what he should do with his platform?
Yeah, he only did this with Cece.
He has such an insanely high opinion of himself that he's calling it my platform.
And it's so transparent. It's so transparent because it's just like the most obvious way you could try to make it seem like you're doing something, right?
Yeah,
so it's like you get called out for, all this I was about to do a bill, all this stuff. You get called out for what him and Ryan did and his sort of lack of awareness. And then, so what's he do? Oh, next time I'm interviewing somebody, I'll say, what do you think I should do? I'll appear very humble.
On the other hand, there's this, which is what happens when you cross a camera with a bad guy from a Batman movie. At 114.18.
Don't forget about the 8 Can't Wait campaign.
I used to subscribe to the Campaign website. It's the Bill Simmons podcast. I'm Chris.
And I'm Matt.
I feel like we can turn that into a beat.
Oh, man. Bill Trap Simmons. Okay, I'll see what I can do.
Look.
Look. Hey, what a coincidence. They're having less incidents. Look. Hey, what a coincidence. They're having less incidents. Look. Hey, what a coincidence. They're having less incidents. Look. Hey, what a coincidence. They're having less incidents.
One time, Matt, I was staying with my family, my two brothers, my mom and dad, at an Embassy Suites in Kansas City. So the way it worked is Embassy Suites has like the living room, which has a fold-out bed.
Have told me this story.
And then there's the bedroom, which has two beds. So it was great. So it was like one boy in each bed. One boy sleeps on the floor because that's how we did it. And then my parents on the fold-out couch in the living room. And in the middle of the night, I hear somebody going to the bathroom. I realize it's my dad, but I'm like, it definitely sounds like he is taking a dump. Like based on the sound of him taking a leak, I'm like, this is not a standing up, number one. This is definitely a sitting down, number one. So the next morning, I was like, Dad, did you go poop with the door open to our bedroom in the middle of the night last night? He goes, no, I just took a leak. And I was like, it sounded like you were sitting down. And he says, oh, yeah, I was sitting down. And I said, why did you get up and pee sitting down in the middle of the night? And he goes, well, you don't wake up as much. Like, all right, logic checks out.
I don't think of it that way. I sometimes do it because I'm like, I don't trust my aim. It's dark.
In the middle of the night?
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus. I always thought they should make glow-in-the-dark toilet seats.
It's not a bad idea.
And that way you just have to hit the middle. But I always, to come clean, I pee by sound. And there's a lot of times, when you hear no sound.
I knew a guy in high school who never sat down or never stood up to pee.
What did he do at urinals or like ball games?
He would go in the stall.
What was the deal? Probably bad penis destruction.
Yeah. Yeah, that was probably it.